Welcome back to an update video on this Red EVO build series. I do have some good news. The Red EVO has found a bit more of a permanent home where it won't need to be pushed in and out of a heated garage all the time. So the good news is I can just kind of leave it in one spot. The bad news is I won't be able to put it up on a hoist all the time, but hopefully with the engine and trans in, we should be in good shape and not need a hoist for a while. So one thing we're going to cover in this video is finishing up some of our brake line stuff, and one of the items you may recall from our other videos is doing the hard lines and putting all those hard lines in place, especially coming right from the ABS module. Well, one of the lines that came with the car was broken. Luckily, it was the shorter one, and I did find it brand new. I found a brand new OEM one online, ordered that, so we're going to go ahead and install that. And it works out well that this was the one that's kind of the short one on the passenger side. It makes it a bit easier to get in here with the engine in place and everything. So I was able to sneak it through where it slides through the little rubber grommet and get it up in place and tighten it up. So I did buy this stainless steel brake line kit from STM. This is the STM kit. I know it looks black, but that's because it has this protective coating over it. And it did seem like a good time to go ahead and buy these brake lines, get them installed. Of course, we'll do some racing with this car either way. And I just thought it's a good investment to make at this point. Get rid of these old, who knows how old, OEM probably, brake lines here. So I'm going to show you the process on one of the fronts and one of the rears. These brake line clips, I'm not really sure how you're supposed to always get them off. I just usually utilize a screwdriver and a hammer and then pound these clips off. These clips are kind of what hold the brake lines in place. And on the fronts here, there are two of those clips, one that holds kind of on the shock side, and then one that holds to more the frame of the car. And again, both times I utilize a screwdriver, kind of pry them off, or use a hammer to pound them off. Then we're just going to pull out our old brake hose, get this brake hose out of the way. And here you can see these clips. Now, if you watch any of my other videos, you know I usually like to compare the old to the new. So we're just comparing this new brake line to the old one we just removed. And it does look a little bit longer, but of course, compared to this rear that we just threw on screen, you can tell the rears are really short. So this should be the front one that we need to install. It should be the same from side to side. So you can install either one of these front ones on either side of the car. And the first thing I'm going to do is get it screwed into this hard line. One thing with the brake hard lines and getting these started, it's just always easier, I found, just to kind of make sure you get these lined up and started first before you even kind of bolt much of anything in place, because they are just a bit tricky to get started and you definitely don't want to cross thread them. So I just made sure that I was getting those threads started first on that hard line where it bolts to the hose. And then also paying attention to the fact that this hard line, it looks like it kind of has a nut on it, and basically it does need to line up one way. I'm sure it's actually more than one way that it can line up, but you need to make sure that it's lined up with another flat side of that mount that it mounts to before you put that clip in place. Otherwise, that clip will be really hard to push on. So we're going to make sure we get this pushed up in place all the way so that clip isn't too hard to get on. And you can see the part that kind of protrudes through, where that clip goes in. So you should see a good portion of that protruding through. That usually means you got it lined up right. And also you really won't be able to spin that hose anymore once it's kind of pushed up in place and held in place like it should be. So of course, we're just gonna go ahead and hammer that in place, get that clip on to hold the top part of this brake hose. And then if you're unfamiliar with using brake line stuff, they do make special wrenches to kind of make sure you don't round off the nuts on these lines. So this is a brake line wrench, at least that's the way I've heard it referred to. As you can see, it just kind of wraps around a lot more than a normal wrench would. So that kind of helps prevent you from potentially wearing this, rounding it off or anything like that. So that is just a 10mm brake line wrench we're going to utilize there. And then we're going to move to the bottom portion of this hose where it connects to our strut, or our shock, I should say. Same thing down here. It's going to work pretty much the same as the top, but I'm going to give you a good view so you can see exactly how it should look when it falls in all the way. And after it's in all the way, same process here. You're just going to put that clip on and then pound it in place. You'll probably want to utilize something, especially in tight areas, to make sure the clip is pounded on all the way. So I just used like a screwdriver to make sure it was in, a little bit beyond flush with the mount piece that it goes to. So there we go. We got one of the front ones in place. Of course, I did the same thing on the other side, but I didn't film it because, repetitiveness. So onto the rear, though, we'll show you what the rear one looks like. It's of course a little bit simpler because there is only one clip holding it in place, so it makes it a little bit easier. But I'm gonna note the way that this factory one is ran. You can see it has a 90-degree elbow, basically coming off of that hose that goes down. You can see how it's pointed towards the rear of the car, and you want to make sure it's kind of got the clearance for that upper control arm. So again, utilizing a screwdriver, just something to kind of pry this off. And once the clip's out of the way, we can remove our old OEM hose. And we're gonna go ahead and install our new one. I cleaned up the area a little bit, or at least got rid of some of that excess debris. You don't wanna get any kind of loose debris, of course, inside your brake lines. So make sure we clean that up before we try to even get this new hose mounted in place. And same process here to the front. I like to just make sure that I get this nut started that bolts to this hose before I really put that clip in place, because this way I have a bit more flexibility as far as lining this up and kind of making sure it's straight. Otherwise, if the hose is bent a little bit in the wrong direction while you have that clip mounted in, you kind of then have just like two different points trying to meet that aren't going to line up. And if you have a little bit of flexibility on one end or the other, you can kind of feel it out a little bit more, I would say, and just to make sure that the threads are going in right. And you probably heard me say this before, but take your time. I had to kind of start it, and then I felt like it was going, but it wasn't, so I backed it off and tried again. So you just want to take your time with stuff like this so you don't end up messing up the threads. And then we're going to put our clip in place and just get that started a little bit. And then again, just utilize a hammer, tap it in place, and a screwdriver again, just to make sure it's all the way in. And then I didn't tighten up the brake hose all the way quite yet. And what's nice about that is if you don't tighten up that hose all the way, then you can kind of swivel this, as you can see here. And you may want to swivel it and bend it to the right spot where it's kind of, again, pointing more towards the rear of the car and making sure you got enough clearance for that upper control arm. And as always, take a picture. If you got your old hose in place, take a picture of your old hose before you remove it. Then you can just kind of reference that when you put your new one in place as well. So there we go. Now we got the rear hose in place. And of course we did that to the front and the rear on both sides. I got the hoses in place. My Brembo calipers are kind of almost fully complete. So hopefully soon enough, I'll have an episode where I bolt these calipers on. These freshly rebuilt calipers will be put in place and connected to these hoses. One other thing I did was kind of finish up some stuff with the power steering area. So I got this power steering line mounted and put in place. Of course, we had that out, kind of made everything easier to drop the engine in. Actually, the power steering pump itself, I believe I removed when I dropped the engine as well. So we got that line in place, and then we also got a heat shield that mounts to the side here. I want to put that in place as well since I had it. And of course, it's pretty easy to get to now when there's not even a turbo mounted in place. So we just went ahead and there's two bolts that hold that in place, went ahead and tightened those up. And finally, I just want to do a quick test fit on this intercooler. I have no idea what it is. I want to make sure it fit behind this OEM crash beam. And there are some markings on this intercooler that I'm going to show you here. I don't know what they mean. Obviously, there's like a kind of production date on there. But if anybody knows exactly what brand intercooler would do something like this, I'd be curious if you had any more information to let me know what intercooler this actually is. Looks like a pretty decent one. I'm going to use it either way, but just curious. So I did remove that front crash bar again, and just so I could get this intercooler mounted in place. And I wanted to make sure, of course, that the crash bar would fit in over the top of it and clearance everything well. And it does look exactly like that. That's how it was. It was mounted this way before when the car was previously put together. And I could kind of tell by some of the markings on the intercooler where areas where like the mesh would bolt to the front bumper. You can see those areas that it was kind of rubbing a little bit against the intercooler. It is a bit of a tight fit, but I imagine the larger intercoolers always are a little bit of a tight fit. But it does look like it should clearance just fine, which is good because I do want to run that front crash beam. And that's going to be about it for this episode, guys. I know it's probably a little short and sweeter than most of mine. So, in an effort to kind of put out a bit more content, a lot more frequently, I might try to do a bit shorter videos and see what they do. And this way I can also make them a bit more concise to just certain topics that I'm working on. So hopefully this will be something you guys enjoy. Either way, let me know. I mean, if you'd prefer I just did long updates with everything I filmed, I can try to do that as well. I just really want this to be something you guys just want to sit down and watch and get a little bit of value from, hopefully. No matter what, the people that are hearing me right now, listening at the very end of this video, you guys are the ones. You guys are the ones I make this for. I appreciate you. You guys are the ones that help make this kind of what it is. So again, leave me your feedback. Let me know if there is anything you want me to be doing differently. But as always, this is Paul from Boosted Films, and thanks so much for watching. I just want to say that domestic violence is never okay. If you or someone you know is experiencing issues with a partner and doesn't feel safe, please visit the website thehotline.org or call 1-800-799-SAFE.